What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? AJ Gore here, and I'm going to be taking you guys through the new LiveTarget ThreadFin Shad deep diving crankbait out of this month's Monster Bass box. All right, now let's talk about rigging. So I'm basically going to be putting this on a bait casting rod and reel setup. And I'm going to be using 12-pound test line, and really nothing major. I'm going to be going with the good old classic polymer knot. Pretty strong, pretty durable. It's actually, in my opinion, one of the best knots to use when tying on a crankbait. One little tip here, make sure you give yourself plenty of line so you're not working back and forth having to move your rod too much. You can actually just set it down and you have plenty of line to work with while you tie your knot. So there's a lot of different ways you can fish this bait. For me, you know, this is a deep diving crankbait. Like I said, it fishes down to about 12 foot of water. You don't exactly have to fish it in those deep of waters. You can fish in shallow waters. That's the great thing about a crankbait. The whole goal really is to get down to the bottom and contact the bottom surfaces, whatever that may be. From rocky structures, which is where this bait is really going to be, work very well for you, to trees and other debris. You want to contact those structures and make those noises, disturb that little bottom surface of the waterway and really attract those fish. So let's get into that and I'll show you what that's going to look like. So really right now I'm fishing in about anywhere from about 16 foot to a foot of water is where I'm at. Like I said, this thing's going to hit and start contacting the bottom as deep as 12 foot. But I'm going to throw this thing up into the shallows and start hitting them rocks and working it back. And you don't always have to let your reel do the work. You can let your rod do the work, and that's where that moderate to fast action rod is going to come in handy. So you can start contacting the bottom like I am, and then I'm just dragging and then picking up the slack a lot of times with my reel, and I can let that really sensitive rod and a really nice rod like I've got in this Cast King let me know that I'm contacting and hitting things, from trees to rock and keeping in contact with the bottom. And then as I come out deeper, it keeps dragging me deeper until I come off of that shelf and run to the end of its ability. So like I said, crankbaits work the best when they're contacting things. And you can go in and fish it in some structures. If you've got a lot of trees and things like that, you can still throw in those trees. Don't let that scare you. Throw in there. Let that bill actually hit and bang those trees. Now, hook set is going to be key. Whenever you come in and you think you're getting a bite or whatever, you're not going to set the hook hard. It's going to be more of a sweeping action, and that moderate to fast action in that rod is going to allow it to really bend and pull the hooks into the fish's mouth rather than yanking. Like on a big barb hook, you're going to want to yank and really set the hook. These smaller treble hooks, you're not going to want to go ahead and yank. You're going to end up pulling it out of the fish's mouth. So a nice sweeping pull is going to set those hooks in and lock them in. If you set the hook, for when that fish, you first feel that bite, is actually going to pull the first set of hooks out, move it around in its mouth, and you're not going to get a good locked in hook set. So it's a sweeping motion, and that's really all you're going to do. Now, one thing that's really key and important here is, so I am fishing, like I said, in a lot of structure. There's a lot of trees, a lot of weeds and debris. It is okay to go ahead and once you feel it slow up and hang, keep continuing your motion for a minute, and sometimes it's going to pull off. But if it doesn't pull off, stop. Stop your drag and give it some slack. Crankbaits float, or the majority of them do, and they actually, when they're diving and being pulled, they dive down. So when you stop, so like right here, here's a perfect scenario. I'm actually hung in a tree. So I'm going to let it go and see if it's going to back up. If it was a rock or something else, it would actually back right off of the rock, but it's not. So what we're going to want to do to get this crankbait out of a tree, if you're in a boat or a kayak, this will work just fine for you. Get on the back side of where it got hung, come to the other side, and it comes right off. Keep pulling on it while it's hung in the tree. You're only going to sink it in deeper. Give it slack. Go to the back side of whatever you're hung on, and then pull from behind it. And then make sure you're behind it, not straight over top of it, because that doesn't change much. If you actually go from the direction it came, a lot of times it'll come right off. Other times, like I said, if you give it slack and just let it float right up, that works perfect in rocky structures. So right now I'm kind of snagged up, hung up in something. So like I said, I'm going to let off, give it plenty of slack, and I'm going to give it a second. And a lot of times you can bring it right back off the bottom, and there it is. Come right out of there. Now, crankbait is a great bait that you can use to parallel the bank with. You don't have to just follow the actual transition of the actual structure. If it's sloping up or whatnot, you can parallel the bank, and in long casts, that just gives you that much longer area to actually drag your bait across and hopefully come into the strike zone. So when it comes to rigging of the ThreadFin Shad, I've got it on 12-pound copolymer. I chose the copolymer because it's a great all-around line for the different structure, the rocks, as well as some of the different trees that I'm fishing out of. But if you really want to get to the really deep depths, fluorocarbon is going to work best for you. 12-pound to 17-pound fluorocarbon is primarily going to be great for a lot of different applications. Next, I've got it set up on a medium fast rod. I don't want too big of a backbone for a crankbait. I want a decent backbone, but not real heavy, but I want a fast action. That's going to allow me for better hook sets and not a hard crank hook set, that swooping action like I talk about. That is perfect in a medium to fast action. Plus, that medium to fast action is going to allow for you to really feel the bottom and a lot of the debris. A really good sensitive rod like this Cast King, you're going to feel every little tick, every little bang, and you're going to know the difference between hitting the bottom and actually when a fish has that ThreadFin Shad in its mouth. So, reel choice. I like a reel in the 6-speed world. This one right here is actually a 6:1, which is actually going to allow me a little bit of a higher speed ratio to go ahead and start cranking that bait faster so it contacts the ground faster, and that means a longer stride of that bait bouncing on the bottom. Plus, once it does contact the bottom, I'm not so fast that I have to slow down a ton. I can just slow it down a little bit and keep cranking and keep rolling and keep that bait against the bottom and the structure. So I really like this LiveTarget crankbait. It's a really nice body. It's about 5/8 ounce of a weight, which is a good amount of weight. It's not too heavy, not too light. So you're gonna be able to sling this thing for quite a ways, especially with 12-pound test, as well as just the actual sound of it. It's got a heavy knock to it. Man, that thing, when you contact the bottom, when this bill is hitting all the debris and structure on the bottom, plus with the knock of that big heavy rattle inside, and it's not a bunch of little BBs. I mean, if you almost crack this thing open, I'd expect to see maybe 2 very large size spheres in there banging around. That's a very heavy rattle, and it's a really abusive one in there. So not only, you know, with it contacting the bottom, you're going to be getting a lot of sound from the bill hitting the bottom, but then the weights inside, those balls in there are slamming the sides, contacting, making a ton of racket, and it's going to really prompt those fish to strike. Another cool feature is right now on my lake here in the southwest, the shad spawn was amazing. And I'm talking there's thousands and thousands of shad out there, and this bait ball of the ThreadFin Shad is matching the shad in my lake perfect, and it's sure to be something these bass are feeding on greatly. Some of you guys might be asking, okay, what's a bait ball exactly? A bait ball is, think about a big school of shad that you see a lot of times out in your bodies of water, your lakes, your ponds, and they school up a lot, and you get these big balls of shad. So when the bass are actually shooting through and fighting through those shads, trying to consume a lot, safety in numbers. So those shad will ball up and they'll huddle up together, and at times it protects them, other times it makes one heck of a great meal for the bass, but it's a bait ball, so to speak. And so LiveTarget has taken that same theory and created a bait ball all in its own bait. So when you look at this crankbait, it's not just one fish, it has the whole shape of one fish, but then it's got the illusion of a bait ball. So I think you're going to find that the LiveTarget ThreadFin Shad is going to be a great option to use. And like a lot of other crankbaits, this is a really easy bait to use once you understand how crankbaits work. You can parallel the banks. You can go from shallow to deep, deep to shallow. Whether you're a bank fisherman, kayak fisherman, or on a bass boat, this is going to work really well for you. It's an easy one to throw. Not a whole lot of action to it. You're going to throw it out there and just retrieve it back. Best thing is going to work for you is if you're contacting structure, but this will also catch fish even if it's not contacting the structure. Your better strikes, your better actions is when it's banging off of things, really letting the bill of it make noise, and then of course the actual rattle from inside the bait make its noise. But if you're in deep water and not contacting structure, you can still pick fish up with this bait ball. If you already haven't, guys, jump online, monsterbass.com, order up your subscription. It's going to be tailored to your region specifically. It's going to get you on fish a lot easier with baits that you're actually going to use in your area. It's perfect. Get online, get your Monster Bass box, and get to catching bigger fish today, guys. I'm out of here.